Hey everyone, it's Alice and welcome to the mid-year Freakout book tag. This is actually the second mid-year Freakout book tag video that we have done, as we did do it last summer as well. I will link that up in the cards in case you would like to see how our reading was going this time last year. I do want to say a quick thank you to everybody who has subscribed over the last 12 months, because when we filmed our first mid-year Freakout book tag video, we had like either 4 or 5 subscribers, and we've been doing YouTube for just over 6 months, and now we're a year in and we've got over 250 subscribers, so thank you so much to everybody who has decided to hop on to our little bumbling train. This tag has been harder to choose this year because I've had less 5-star reads, but the 5-star reads that I have had have been of such a high standard that it's basically impossible to separate them. So trying to pick just one favourite book or one favourite sequel has been really difficult. I decided I wasn't going to double up on any books, so I have shifted things around a bit. But basically any books that I mentioned in any of the kind of like favourite categories, they could all fit in as well. Yeah, quite a few favourites this year, but some of the other ones have been really easy. So it's been a fun tag to prepare, and I hope that you enjoy our answers to this one. So without further ado, let's get on with it. The first question is the best book you've read so far in 2021, and for me that's Melt My Heart by Bethany Rutter. Sean and I read this together as part of our YA Book Prize reading vlog, where we read the YA Book Prize shortlist every year and choose our winner. For me, this was my winner, personally. It follows a girl called Lily Rose. She is fat and she has a twin sister who is really skinny, and her twin sister's constantly complaining about her own weight. So Lily Rose kind of internalises that and feels like, oh, I'm not allowed to be who I am, because other than this big difference between us, we're identical. But Lily Rose actually ends up going out with the guy that her twin sister has a crush on. She doesn't realise that it is the same guy, and shenanigans ensue. There is such wonderful bisexual rep in this story, and I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did. This is one that I'm already thinking of rereading over the summer, because I think this is going to become a bit of a comfort read for me, but definitely a new favourite book of mine. The second question is the best sequel that you've read so far this year, and for that one I had to pick A Tangle of Spells by Michelle Harrison. This is the third and final book in the Pinch of Magic series, following the Widdershins sisters. In this book the family move to a new location, so we get to explore the world away from Crowstone and see Betty, Fliss and Charlie get up to some more adventures. The first 2 books in the series, I think I gave them 4 stars each. One of them might have been a 5-star, but this is the best out of the entire series. It feels like a completely different story because it's not set in Crowstone, but it gave me a whole new appreciation for these characters and for Michelle Harrison's writing style, and I'm definitely looking forward to picking up more of her work in the future. Question number 3 is new releases that you haven't read yet, but you are planning to, and I've actually got 4 for this one. I've got Lore by Alexandra Bracken. I got this in an Owl Crate. I was planning to do the Owl Crate read-along for it, and I completely missed it, so I'd like to catch up on that eventually. Mystery Impossible by Maggie Stiefvater, which is the second book in the Dreamer trilogy. This came out last month and it's one of my most anticipated releases of 2021, so I will be reading this before the end of the year. I would just like to get to it sooner rather than later. The Yearbook by Holly Bourne. This also came out last month. YA Contemporary. Holly Bourne is absolutely brilliant. She's one of my favourite authors and I'm looking forward to reading this one. It's a bit chunkier than I was expecting. I think if it was a bit thinner I probably would have sped through it already, but I want to give myself some time to really savour this one and to absorb myself into the story. And also just look at those sprayed edges, they're so beautiful. And last but not least, I'd also like to get to Realmbreaker by Victoria Aveyard this year. This is chunky, so this one is a bit more ambitious, but I've been really enjoying Victoria Aveyard's books so far, as you'll find out shortly, because I'm about to mention her in a couple of questions' time. But I would like to get to Realmbreaker. It's the first one in a new series. I'm not sure whether it is YA or whether it's bridging the gap into adult, but it sounds really cool. It's got lots of different perspectives as well. There's a whole ass list of people on the back that are different perspectives. So I want to find out what's going on in this one. The fourth question on the list are your most anticipated releases for the second half of 2021. I've managed to pick 4 of these as well. Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff. I'm not all that excited about it. I think because everybody else is hyping it up, I'm getting on the hype wagon. I have pre-ordered it. I'm hoping to read it this year. But I'm still a bit apprehensive because it's Jade Kristoff and it's vampires, and I'm not quite sure, but I am planning on picking it up. The Gilded Cage by the Net Nonny. I'm only halfway through the Prison Healer at the moment, but I am addicted to this world. I want to know more about these characters. I've got so many theories on where I think the story will go, and the ratings that I've seen so far have been very good. And even though the Prison Healer only came out in April, the sequel is being released in October. We don't often get 2 books from a series released in a year. I'm hoping that means that the third one will also be quite soon. But it means that should be nice and fresh in my mind, so I won't need to reread the first one and I can just enjoy the continuation. I'm also really looking forward to As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson. This is the third and sadly final book in the Good Girls Guide to Murder series. I love Pip Fitzsimobby. I think she is one of the best characters I've ever read. I've read book 1 and I gave it 5 stars. I've read book 2 twice and I loved it both times. I've got theories on how book 3 is going to go and I'm scared. But this is definitely one that as soon as it arrives, I'm smashing through it. And I'm also really excited about Under a Whispering Door by TJ Klune. This is like a gay romance between a guy who dies and the person who's like ferrying him to the afterlife, the ferryman. So I'm interested to see how this one goes. There's been a few people who've been reading advanced copies in the Illumicrate Discord group and they've all been giving it 5 stars, so definitely feeling the hype on this one already. Question number 5 is your biggest disappointment, and sadly for me that one is Witches Steeped in Gold by Shannon Smart. This is her debut novel. It's a Jamaican inspired fantasy about 2 witches from rival clans who are teaming up together to kill one of their mothers. I stupidly thought this was sapphic and I was expecting like an enemies to lover lesbian romance love story with fantasy and badass witches and Jamaican inspired mythology and folklore, but it's not that. I don't know, I both like and dislike that because I'd obviously been going into this assuming it was going to be sapphic, and I think that is one of the reasons that I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I was going to. But also the world's brilliant. The concept is brilliant, but there's just something about the writing that feels a bit disjointed, it feels a bit unedited, and it could have been cleaned up a bit more. It's also a case that the romance that does develop feels very one-dimensional, and I didn't believe in it at all. And the 2 main characters don't actually meet until like over halfway through the book, so you don't get a lot of interactions between them, and when you do, the pace speeds up dramatically, but when you don't, it's very disjointed. I'm hoping that the sequel will be better, but considering this was one of my most anticipated books of 2021, it's sad that I gave this one 3 stars. Question number 6 is your biggest surprise, and that has to be A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J Maas. Not only because this is one of the biggest books that we've read, so it was a big surprise, but also because I just didn't think I was going to enjoy it, and I loved it. I only gave it 4 stars, so it wasn't like a new favourite of mine, but the first book put me into a bit of a reading slump when I reread it in October, and I put off reading this one as long as I could. But we flew through this. Considering my brain's been in a bad place recently, I've been struggling to concentrate on reading, I've been struggling to basically do anything, but this just absorbed me. I cared about what was going on with Feyre, I cared about what was going on with Rhys, I wanted to know what was going on with Tamlin, I liked the rest of the Night Court when they were introduced, like their kind of inner circle. Yeah, everybody says that these books are like really smutty and there's loads of sex in them, but there's not really that much sex. So if you, like me, as somebody who doesn't really like your fantasy with that much romance, I'd actually really recommend these, because there is a little section where they do the do many times very close together, but until that point it's like, oh, we're like 75% in, 80% in, and there's been no action whatsoever. So if you have been putting these off because you don't like smutty novels, I would recommend them. Give it a try. It might be your biggest surprise in 6 months' time. Question number 7 was actually the hardest one on this entire list because it was your new favourite author. I've gone with Marissa Meyer because I've owned her books for as long as I can remember. I bought Cinder, Cress and Scarlet before Winter was released. I think just after I'd started blogging. So like 2014. I've had this since it came out because it was in an owl crate, and I'd never read any of her books, but I read Heartless in February and I gave it 4 stars. Really enjoyed it, and I'm planning on reading Cinder this month if my brain will let me focus on it for long enough to actually get through it. I wouldn't say that Marissa Meyer is a favourite author yet, but my problem is most of the books that I've been reading this year are from authors that I've read before, so I could have put Melt My Heart in here. I could have put Bethany Rutter as a new favourite author, but I've only read one of her books. She only has one other, but I didn't want to mention it twice. So I thought I would mention Heartless and Marissa Meyer, and hopefully the Cinder series will end up impressing me as much as everybody thinks it's going to, and then she will solidly become a new favourite author of mine. Question number 8 is newest fictional crush. I don't often get fictional crushes, but I have to do a shout out to Neil McNair from Today, Tonight, Tomorrow by Rachel Lynn Solomon. I finished reading this last week, and it's just gorgeous. Like, it took me, I think, 3 months to actually read it. I kept dipping in and out, and I just wasn't getting invested, and I didn't think I cared about these characters. And then Neil writes the main character a letter, and it's just so sweet that I was literally crying. I was like, oh my god, I wasn't expecting to care about these characters that much. But I really did end up caring about them, and I don't know, he's just really nice. Like, he's got a troubled background, but you wouldn't know that because he hides, like, all of his insecurities, all of his kind of personal life. He hides it all to put on this really uber professional front at school. And he's just a really interesting character to read about, and he's one that's going to stick in my mind for a while. So I'm going to give him for this answer. Yeah, I don't really get fictional crushes all that often, but Neil could be one. Question number 9 is your newest favourite character, and for this one I'm going with Evangeline Samos from the Red Queen series. I hated Evangeline in book 1, I didn't really care for her in book 2 either, I can't remember anything in there. But in book 3, we randomly get introduced to her perspective, and you get chapters from Evangeline's perspective, and being in her head is amazing. I really care about her motivations, I care about her character and the way that she is being forced into a certain mould. She's being moulded into a certain role in this world, and you don't see that from outside. When you're reading from Mare's perspective, Evangeline just seems like she's a bit of a cowbag, and you don't really know what her motivations are or why she is so horrible. You just know that she is very ambitious, cutthroat, determined, doesn't care about anybody or anything really apart from herself. But when you actually read from her perspective, you see that there's so much more to her, and I think it's such an interesting look at the way that the villain is the hero of their own story. So yes, I'm looking forward to reading the next book in the series and hoping that we're going to get more from Evangeline's perspective. I was torn between her and Cameron because there's also a character called Cameron in this book who we get her perspective for a little bit, but Evangeline just pipped her to the post a little bit. Number 10 is a book that made you cry. Death Set Sail by Robin Stevens. I nearly cried while I was talking about this in my wrap-up. I literally read the first page, then put it down and had a bit of a sob, and then was like, sure, I don't want to read it. And we did read it, and it was wonderful, but it did make me cry towards the end as well. It's not even that sad, it's just because it's my favourite series and it's ending, and I didn't want it to end. I know there's a short story collection that I have to look forward to, but then I'm just going to cry through that as well, because I just don't want the Murder Most Unladylike books to be over. I don't want to leave Daisy and Hazel. I'm going to be rereading these so much with the kids when they're older. Question number 11 is a book that made you happy. For this one I'm saying It Sounded Better in My Head by Nina Kerwood. This is an Australian YA novel about a girl who is developing a crush on her best friend's brother, but it's like genuinely, legitimately funny, and I don't find books funny very often. Books that are supposed to be funny normally make me curl up in a little ball of cringe and just want to die. So the fact that this one actually made me laugh out loud, and there were sections that I read out to Sean because I was like, this is a really funny section, you should have read this book with me. He's like, I didn't find it that funny. I was like, it was really funny. It was so funny. So definitely recommend this one for somebody looking for a book to make them happy. Number 12 is the most beautiful book you've acquired this year. Had to be In the Ravenous Start by A.M. Strickland. This is the beautiful Illumicrate version, and look, I know they're going to be slightly blurry, but whoa, those edges. It's stunning. I like skulls, I like flowers, I'm a proper edgy kid. This is exactly my aesthetic. A big old skull made out of flowers. So definitely the most beautiful book I've hauled this year. And last but not least, the final question is books that you are planning to read in the rest of the year. So for this one, I want to finish off The Shadow Rising by Robert Jordan and The Burning Kingdoms by Sally Green. I want to read Warstorm by Victoria Aveyard to get this series finished off, apart from the Broken Throne short story collection, because that is ridiculously expensive online, and I don't know how invested I am in the world to actually pay that much for a short story collection. And also Monstrous Design by Kat Dunn, which I have pre-ordered from Illumicrate. It isn't here yet, but that will finish off the Dangerous Remedy duology, so I want to get that done 2. And that is the Mid-Year Freak Out book tag. If you are deciding to take part in this tag, please link your videos down below so that I can see your answers to these. I think this is a great way of checking in with your reading and seeing how you're doing in the middle of the year. I've read less than I wanted to. I've read more than I thought I would have because I thought I'd be back at work full time, but less than I want to have read because I haven't been back at work and we've been managing to read like a book a week, and that's not really normal for us. Like, last May we read 31 books, this May we read 8 books. So you can see our reading has gone downhill rapidly. But I'm hoping to come to a place of acceptance where I'm happy with the fact that we're reading less because we're reading really good books. Like, we're not reading many 1 stars, we're not reading many 2 stars. We've hardly DNF'd anything this year. So it's looking good. It's looking good. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and if you would like to subscribe, we'd be super duper grateful. We post new videos every Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday, so we'll see you again in a couple of days with another video. Bye! So I will link that if you're interested in seeing how our reading was going at the midway point of last year. I have forgotten to put the ring light on, so I will go and do that. I knew something was wrong. This is starting off extremely well. I might as well check the... Oh, for God's sake, this is the second time they've fallen on me. For God's sake! It's hot and it's dry. If it was just hot, it wouldn't be a problem, but it's hot and dry. And my throat can't cope with that, and now it looks like I'm crying.